Okay, so let's get into it. As usual, pop your questions or your comments into the chat, and I'll be pausing along the way. So the end of this module, we're going to, have a think about what the requirements are for cyclists for safe travel. And I'll point you at technical information about cycling safety and cycling infrastructure, common road safety audit issues, and basic understanding of cycling treatments. It's an interesting one. Max, probably more appropriate if Max had done this one, because he's doing a lot of the cycling infrastructure training around Australia and New Zealand at the moment. The federal government's got us, Amy Gillett Foundation, and us to run training, and they've heavily subsidized it. So if you're interested in a lot more on cyclist safety, well, there's 4 modules on cycle infrastructure, cycle safety at, I think it's an $85 course, which you can do. Jump onto our website if you're interested in that. Hugely subsidized by the Amy Gillett Foundation and the federal government. So that's exciting. And yeah, within that, Max and myself delve into a lot of this in a lot more detail, because as many of you know, you're passionate road safety advocates and in the engineering side of things and design and the like. And there's a huge amount in cycling safety at the moment. It's a growing area, and we continue to discover new things, and guides are produced, and there's new practices. So it's always a challenge to keep up to speed on everything. But I suppose these important cyclist requirements are fairly consistent. It's about sometimes how you get to these requirements. Separation, clear sight lines, so space to ride, smooth surface. Speed maintenance is an interesting one, which I'll come back to and sort of link that to safety, as well as, the encouraging people to ride, that they're not stopping and starting the whole journey. Connectivity and information. So very simplistically, we're trying to think like a cyclist when we're doing the audits, and think about what issues the cyclist might face. Now, we do have an advantage a lot of the time that somebody in the audit team is somebody who rides a bike, or certainly lots of the audit team have ridden bikes in the past. So you can at least get some feel for that. But yeah, asking yourself all those usual questions that you would as an auditor. Okay, if I'm turning from this way, would I feel safe there? And can cars see me here? If other cars were turning, am I in dooring zones? And just asking all those types of questions. But interestingly, like, cyclists as a road user group are hugely varied, in the sense that we have the sort of the kids riding, we have the lycra clad training cyclists, the mammals, as we tend to call them, the middle-aged men in lycra. And I say that I can probably put my hand up and say I'm one of those on some weekends. And we've got cargo bikes, we've got then all of these other sort of micro mobility modes that are starting to come in. We've got the e-bikes. Then you've got, your scooters, your powered scooters, which are kind of, are they a pedestrian? Are they a bike? It's getting quite mixed and varied in there. So unfortunately, when facilities are built for cyclists, they may not be used by all cyclists. And that can be frustrating as a designer or an engineer, where you've spent all of this money on a separated shared path facility, and then some cyclists elect to use the road. So as a road safety auditor, we are trying to think of all of these users. Then we may be able to enhance a project by thinking through that. How can we encourage more people to use the safer facility? Could we do that with directional signage? Can there be ways to guide cyclists onto the safer areas? So you're thinking about all of that. There's also the discussion around sort of think 8-year-old to 80-year-old, and that 8 to 80 design is a bit of a worldwide phenomenon, I suppose, to say if you can design your city for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, you'll cater for your entire population, if you think about that. Now, that's pretty good advice. I think, though, for some cycling facilities, you design for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, you get wonderful outcome for a good portion of the cycling community. There's a portion that may not use some of those facilities. One advantage we have with cycling and cycling infrastructure and auditing of cycling infrastructure is that we're actually very well placed with documented guidelines and standards. Now, you may say, well, that we're in the same category for all road users. Well, we're really not. I mean, I think we are very much lacking in documented quality guidance for motorcyclists and for pedestrians, but cyclists have got a good run. So the audit guideline, so part 6, which from Austroads, does cover off cycling safety features in the prompt lists, and there's lots of focus on that. There is this document which is pretty good. It's the Shared Path Audit Guidelines done by Vic Roads a while back, but it just, I suppose, enhances when you're specifically doing an audit of a shared path facility, what specific features are we thinking about? So a lot of stuff taken from some of the Austroads guides, like the Austroads Guide to Road Design, Part 6A, for example, which is this one, Paths for Walking and Cycling, Cycling Aspects of the Austroads Guide, and some of the Australian standards. So part 9 of 1742 is bicycle facilities. So good documented stuff pulled together. And then there's the supplementary guidance we see from jurisdictions. Victoria has some here, and I had some involvement in those with some colleagues. City of Melbourne's got this nice bike lane design guidance. Queensland's doing a lot of stuff in this space. They have a really strong set of supplementary guidance, and I refer to that a lot, the TMR guidelines. And then, of course, we can go over to other countries around the world and see some wonderful stuff. And as per usual, if you go to the Netherlands, you're going to get a lot of good bicycle infrastructure information. The Crow manual is sort of the Bible of infrastructure design. You get everything in there, and it's all great, and they're continually updating it, and it's really worth getting a copy if you're doing lots in that space. And I've just put a series of other things from around the world: Transport for London and federal highways in the US and the like. But let's get into some specific audit findings, things that you may come across as a road safety auditor. And the first one I'm going to put up here is longitudinal grates. So you can see there, I think the picture says 1,000 words there. And that one was probably a smaller longitudinal grate than some of them that you see out there. Now, I don't think in auditing or in reviewing designs or anything like that, I've seen a new longitudinal grate go in for about 20 years. It's not done by designers. But as a road safety auditor, where I have picked this up, and colleagues within the team have also picked these things up, is where they're doing upgrades to an intersection or upgrades to a bit of road, or they're diverting, doing some bicycle upgrades on a strategic cycling corridor, for example, and there are old existing longitudinal grates like this in the path of travel, and they're not planning to alter those. So again, as an auditor, you'll get out to the site and you'll look at this, and those are the kind of things you identify in your site visit. You won't pick that up from the plan. It's sometimes very hard to pick up off Street View or the like, so you're really out there and you see it. Now, that one's been interesting. So I've done 2 expert witness legal cases on longitudinal grates causing serious injuries to riders. One of them was on the public road network, but the other was in a shopping centre car park. It was quite an interesting one because there are lots of longitudinal grates in shopping centre car parks around Australia. Like we would have liked them to be cycle friendly, but some of them have been there a long time. And the interesting part about that was that the shopping centre did a big redevelopment, and they were trying to get more people into active transport modes into their shopping centre. So they built a big bike rack and a bike pump station, and then they did wayfinding signage off a shared park facility that runs down the back of the shopping centre, directing all the cyclists, into the shopping centre. And it was through the car park, right down along the path of 3 of these big longitudinal grates, and a cyclist went into those. So it's an interesting one as to like whether an audit should be done. That was a little bit of what was discussed in the case. Weren't technically required to do it. It was all, but the question was more asked of, is it reasonable that somebody should have checked, is it going to be a safe travel path from the, in this direction that you're taking them, and then they had to pay out some money there to the injured parties. What's another one here? So this one, let me just explain it. So if this job was to do some cyclist sort of painting of bike lanes, a few raised things here and there, the addition of cycling storage boxes, which is that painted area or that box in front of the lane. So the cyclists sort of are meant to be able to get there, get in front of vehicles, be seen clearly, and get away. So they were putting a new cycling bike box up the front of this one. But again, the audit team got out there and watched the phasing of the signals, and it ended up that they do a right turn out of Blythe Street, or while they have a left turn arrow in. So in that sense, the vehicles, the cyclists could come up here and store out in front, and then the vehicle coming behind trying to do a left turn with a green arrow would be, and they'd have cyclists in front of them. So this became like an interesting debate in the audit team as to how to risk rate this, because I was saying, well, I mean, I don't think people are just going to completely miss them. I mean, they're going to be right in front of them. It's not going to be that, but it's going to cause road rage, that's for sure. But then we got into that debate of, is road rage part of a road safety audit? We had ended up deciding not, but then we were able to talk about some of the challenges of, okay, well, what's actually going to happen here? You're going to have the car will end up going out and around, and that could then have issues either going into the other lane, different swept paths. And so we sort of made something out of that. It was, I mean, to a degree, it was a bit of a moot point in the sense that it was going to be removed when we mentioned it, because it's just not right. But yeah, trying to risk rate that was a little bit tricky. Right, enough talking out of me. Time to get you to do some auditing as such. So it's going to be existing conditions, and we'll go to another country. And the first thing I'm going to do is give a prize for the person who can tell me what country it is. And then I'm going to get you to look for road safety issues for cyclists and write them into the chat. And we'll see where we go. So we'll see if anybody can pick the country, and then they're coming in fast. Scotland, England, Netherlands. David's got it. Well done, David. It's Wales. Now, my Welsh is pretty good, and I'll translate that for you. That translates to cyclist dismount. So prize, prize for David. And now everybody put your auditor hat on, your cycling auditor hat. What issues are we going to see? What are we seeing there for cyclists? Actually, I'll take for any road user. You know, we don't just audit for cyclists, or sort of sometimes we do as a cycling thematic audit, but any road user. Okay. Wow. Gee, we're not wrong. Great group, great stuff coming in. And it was a sort of, I'd said to myself in my head there, I'll give a prize for the first person to spot the longitudinal grate, because I just talked about it and it was number one. And it's come in a lot of times. So it was a real race to who wrote it in first. Zihan there is first with longitudinal grate. So lots of others got it in, but not as quickly. So that's an interesting one. And of course, yeah, maybe even thought about at one point to put it so a cyclist coming along this way didn't fall into it, but it's now been placed right in that in the cycleway. So good spotting for those who found that. And then we go to some others. Lots of people commenting about the sight lines here, and the sight lines saying, okay, well, the cyclist is not going to be able to see vehicles. Vehicles aren't going to be able to see cyclists, and that's a bit of an issue. I'm going to come back to that in a second. I'll just cover off a few of the others that people have popped in there. Yeah, people a little bit worried about where the hazards are on the path, and that's a reasonable thing to think about. We do think about hazards in the path or even close to the path for cyclists. We've got some people scratching their head about the tactiles and whether they'll be a slip hazard and if they're positioned right. I've got to work on my pronunciation apparently, but I get a prize if I get it correct. So I'll be throwing out a few guesses. Now, beautiful. Elliot, you have asked the exact question I was going to ask of the group. So Elliot can have a prize as well. We don't have sightline here. And so, well, hang on, somebody's put a cyclist dismount sign. So does that mean we don't need to put it into our road safety audit because we've it's been obviously alert. Somebody's realized that and they said, okay, well, tell the cyclist to get off and then look and then cross the road. And we do need to consider rider behavior. Zishan, correct. We need to actually consider what people are going to do. It doesn't matter theoretically what would happen. And to me, cyclist dismount signs are the most useless sign we possibly have in our whole signage suite. The only benefit I see of a cyclist dismount sign is when I'm doing a road safety audit, it makes it easier for me to find issues because somebody's already marked it with a cyclist dismount sign for me. They are, yeah, bordering on ridiculous. And here's an example of just the ludicrousness of the way some people think about the use of that sign. So the only thing I say on it is just realize that sign is not going to alleviate the issue, and be the voice of reason as a road safety auditor to put it in there and say, oh, well, you know, the issue is still there. The sign's not going to be effective in terms of cyclists won't dismount, and it might make a traffic engineer somewhere feel better that they've done something, but we really want to try to actually address the issues. Sounds like I got it. Zishan. Okay. So another one that's sort of linked to that was an interesting road safety audit some colleagues were doing. This was a new, quite large subdivision development, and they decided to put a shared path facility right up on property boundary, so where you'd usually have a footpath. But that becomes interesting because you're going to then get a lot more cyclists on that and the speed of cyclists. And it just happened that some of the houses had high fences right up where their garages were. These are all brand new houses, remember. And so that then presented just an elevated risk of a cyclist coming along here, because that's where we're telling them to ride, and then a vehicle coming and backing out and popping there with no sightline. So the audit team, identified this, made the recommendations to do, cut down fences, or remove the first paling if possible. And so that, lessens the likelihood of that, supporting treatments. You still can have a vehicle back out, and it's not going to really completely eliminate that possibility. But the interesting part about this one was that this audit report was then sent to the council that had commissioned this audit, and they sent it back. It had, another 10 recommendations or 10 findings and recommendations. The interesting thing what happened was they sent the audit back and they said, yeah, thanks for that. Happy with all of the audit except for this first finding. And we can't have that in the audit because that is an approved part of the private land and whatever particular building controls and structure plans and whatever, particular guidance there was. So that was all approved and signed off, and that's not our land. So can you take that out, please? And this is where, you'll face these as a road safety auditor, which is people asking you to remove stuff out of your audit because it's not sort of convenient for them, or they don't have a good way to resolve this. And in the end, we stuck to our guns and said, well, appreciate that that's a challenge, and let's have a chat about possible ways you could lessen the risk and the like. But the reality is, it's an issue, it's there, and we're not going to just ignore it because it's hard to deal with. And anyway, that caused a bit of friction, and eventually, not only was some of this rectified, council did have to pay for a lot of those changes, but it was also rectified in the documentation around future development. So there's a bigger picture win in that. It's not the biggest road safety issue we've got in the country, but nonetheless, it's just, if we can improve these things and see these and not build them in the first place, that's a good position to be in. Okay, so thinking about surface issues, we certainly see a lot of different surface issues, and cyclists, it's not just about hitting that and falling off, which is certainly an issue. It's also about alterations in travel path and riders moving out of what would be safer lines to avoid lots of surface issues, pits and big potholes or trenches and these sort of things. So another common finding, I suppose, when you're looking at intersections, and it's often when additional things are added to intersections and the like, is lanes don't line up. So take, for example, this one where you can see the left-hand lane here sort of lines up with the footpath. The right through lane lines up with the left lane here. And okay, so we know we're going to get sideswipe crashes here. You probably know of a few intersections where this happens all the time, and it's not lining up. This person in the middle lane's coming along, sort of daydreaming, but they see their lane just go straight through to there, and then this other car's trying to come in. It's very minor injury crashes. It's often just, most of the time it's just property damage, sideswipe type crashes. We don't like it, but when we have cyclists in this mix in this area, it becomes quite problematic. They're a more vulnerable road user, obviously. So trying to get those to line up is good at a design stage. Once you've got them built like this, it becomes pretty challenging and hard. Sorry, I'll go back to that. We do use RPMs. So they're not RPMs as you might be. So that's the raised reflective pavement markers, but these are RPMs, raised pavement markers. They're more of a dome and they don't have that. And so you dome them and you position them just in that spot. So you basically draw all your grid lines and you know where to position them to try to give some lane delineation. So that's one thing you can look at if you don't have that lineup. You can potentially do some delineated marking through there, but you don't want to confuse drivers in other ways with turn markings that may go in and the like. Anyway, I won't go into the absolute details of that. It's just something to be aware of. But the other one on this is around, okay, well, we've got a bike lane, don't we? Now, we'll talk later about, bike lanes here and Doring and all of those challenges. But you can see here, they've gone with the old option of just drop it off at the intersection and let the cyclists fend for themselves. Right. It's hard. I love the fact that there's a NACTO guide from the USA that is actually titled "Don't Give Up at Intersections." It's a cycling infrastructure guide. And I thought, what a fantastic title, because that is so often the case that people just go, this is just too hard. It's too hard because you're adding in stand-up angles stand-up lanes at intersections to try to get more vehicle capacity a lot of the time through there. Obviously with your turn lanes and everything like that. So the space is of this absolute premium at the intersection point. But again, as auditors, we can throw in variety of options. The gold standard is that separated cycle facility. Probably ideally having this run curbside and then utilizing that sort of path, and that will give a pretty good outcome. But again, there's lots of different guidance on ways that we can lessen this risk. Another challenging one is around the point where the cyclist where the stand-up lane drops out. So you can see here it's kind of one lane and then it opens up to two at the intersection. And you do that it's a traffic engine. It's a real traffic operations thing to do, because each phase you can push more vehicles through and then they come back and they join up to one lane from there, from that point out. But you've got then a car coming up here, and where's their focus? Well, they want to merge. Merging is their big focus. And so cyclists pottering along can be in a bit of a dangerous situation there. Very hard to do anything about that without substantial infrastructure changes. You can think about signal phasing and cyclist head starts and different things like that. A little bit challenging, but something to be aware of. Okay, let's talk about roundabouts. And there's it's been a real area of interest, cyclists and roundabouts. So I'm going to start with urban, sort of low volume, lowish speed roundabouts. And this is an old sort of design that was considered best practice probably 10 years ago. Where you would have the cyclist lane and you would really try to push the cyclist as far away from this danger of vehicles as you possibly could. Sometimes even people would paint a bit of green there to try to sort of encourage the cyclist out as far as possible. Just try to make it green. Yeah, green there, really get them out of the way of these dangerous vehicles. Well, what was sort of discovered through some research on that were two particular dangers associated with that positioning and pushing cyclists out. One was that vehicles would try to overtake. And the vehicles would be overtaking and cyclists would be getting swiped. The second was associated with a vehicle coming up here and looking out this way. And it's what we call a look but fail to see crash. Now, if you want to do some fun bedtime reading, Google look but fail to see crash, because the behavioral psychologists and the human factors people have just gone nuts. Like, they just love this phenomenon. And the reason for it is you've got perfectly good sight lines. There's no sightline impediments. And a driver will come up here. They will look out here and a cyclist is coming in, right? Which they have to give way to under the road rules. The cyclist will continue in and the driver will run straight into the cyclist. And it's not so it's nothing to do with sightline issues, but the behavioral psychologists get so excited about it because they talk about, well, a whole lot of things. It's not what the driver was looking for. So it's a little bit of a longer time to process that they also have to give way to that. The positioning of it was not where exactly they were looking, even though it was, it was there. Some of them get into threat theory that isn't as much of a threat to the driver, so they're slower in processing it. None of this is conscious, like thought of, oh, I don't need to give way to that. No, it's all subconscious going on. But it is really interesting. And yes, so Nick's got the one in there, the Smidsy, which is sorry, mate, I didn't see you, which the motorcycle community uses a lot in a similar fashion. So prize for Nick for knowing that Australian acronym of it, of the same thing. But in the behavioral psychology literature, it's looked but failed to see. Anyway, so all of that combined, plus the ability to do the right turn, as somebody else has pointed out there. If you're stuck and being pushed out here, your right turn, you sort of go, oh, well, what do I do here? Because the car could be going out that way. Changed the design guidance in these situations to encouraging cyclists to, what we say is, claim the lane. And you can see there the use of this thing, prize, first person to name it. I'm sure we'll get a deluge of answers here. It was who could write Sharrow quick enough? Anthony, either quickest typer or quickest internet connection. It is a Sharrow. It just is a mash of the word shared and arrow. And it's trying to indicate this is a shared bit of road where the cyclists and cars might be. So you're trying to get the cyclist to claim the lane. Position in the middle so vehicles can't get past or attempt to squeeze past them. That a vehicle coming up from the side here, they are in a better or more logical position for that vehicle to see and react. And so that is the current sort of one of the bits of guidance on these local urban roundabouts. Now, it brings me back to right at the start where I said 8 to 80. I don't think I'll be sending my 8-year-old out there to claim the lane. It's just not what's going to happen. So, okay, maybe a little bit safer for from that perspective of your commuter cyclists, your very confident cyclists. It's probably not going to encourage other cycling. The gold standard, I'll jump past those, for these urban roundabouts are your protected roundabouts, is what we call them, where you're providing a priority circulating carriageway for cyclists and pedestrians around the roundabout. It's a very Dutch style way of thinking about roundabout design, but works really, really nicely in terms of the safety of cyclists and priority. So there's the Moray Street one in South Melbourne, or one of the Moray Street ones. You see the cyclists sort of get on that and they do a bit of it's probably easier if I go to this one. Cyclist wants to turn right, they would come up here and circulate around and then come back down. And we see some really wonderful sort of safety benefits. Now, if you're if you're asked to audit one of these, then there's some things you want to be thinking about. Okay, sight lines to the pedestrians and the cyclists. You're thinking about vehicles storing on the crossing and the like, and how far have we got from hold line to there? Is it enough for a vehicle to store so they're not propping on the thing? None of these are, to me, super high risk, but there's certainly things you might be thinking about and pointing out. Zishan's put in there, so what about vehicles stuck in the roundabout? So, this vehicle is going to come up here, and then they've got pedestrian crossing, and then another vehicle comes behind, and then we've clogged up the entire roundabout because nobody can get around. Is that a road safety audit issue? No. It's until you find a genuine safety issue out of that, it's not a road safety audit report finding. Okay. In fact, Port Phillip really have had some strong commitment to saying that, the movement of vehicles at high speeds and quickly through these areas is not our priority. Our priority is moving cyclists and pedestrians through these areas. And so they're kind of okay with that clogging up a bit for cars. They don't particularly care, which I think is aligns very well with all their strategic objectives from a higher level, and they're actually playing it out in a bit of action. So, yeah, and it's a really interesting space. With cyclist safety and roundabouts and people trying to, decipher, well, what on earth would you do with a 2-lane roundabout? Because claiming a lane, probably not going to be an option. And in fact, the higher speeds going into these 2-lane roundabouts is a real challenge. Certainly if you take any inspiration from other countries around the world, especially our European friends, 2-lane roundabouts are going to have a grade separated cycle facility under it or over it. It's just, you really wouldn't be operating that. We're still a bit sort of hampered in Australia in a lot of that. This was an interesting design, and some of it was built down Surf Coast Highway, separated bike facility, and then the addition of the sort of what was termed by one of the audit team the mammal pouch. A lot of training cyclists on these routes, and the idea being that a cyclist could, even though they're on the outside and we don't like that, but they could sort of stage their crossing, pause here and do almost like a little bit of hook turn as they went through. Now, the concerns that came out of it was, well, how many could store here? And they're usually riding in packs of more than one. And so we're going to just be starting to store into a dangerous area. And if we've got larger vehicles tracking around here, is that going to be in swept path areas of larger vehicles? So some, audit concerns around these things, which have some merit, but we've got to think about the details of how they play out. Okay. Another interesting one to demonstrate sort of at a design level, you can look at something and looks quite good. And then doing post-opening audits can also be a really beneficial thing. So here's a roundabout out near Traralgon, on the outskirts of Traralgon, and you can see they've got some cyclists using the shoulder on the approach, and then they were worried about cyclists through this, and the dominant movement of cyclists was straight through, so still got challenges on the right turn, but it's a T intersection roundabout. So they created this separated cycle facility here. You can see it's actually a separated facility, showing the bike symbol there, and they get the bikes away and separated out. So it looks really good. And you're thinking, okay, they really thought about this. They're investing in it, making that separation. So then you go to do the post-opening audit, and you're out there and you look at how it's been constructed, and it's sort of constructed generally as it was planned there, but start to wonder whether cyclists would actually know that facility is for them. I kind of feel just the specifics of where this was marked, that a cyclist might think, well, that's the end of my lane, and in I go here to battle it out with traffic. Yes, there's a little cyclist only sign to try and help, but yeah, I'm not sure it's the best. Good point there, picking up some gravel and the like as well, David, for that specific facility. What would a very small addition here, bit of green paint, or actually green skid resistant marking like that would have really told the story of where cyclists are encouraged to go and use that area, and some sweeping and the like would be good too. So that's not the traditional use of green marking, but I'll show you shortly how it's being used a little bit outside of its traditional form. Here's another one trying to use green marking to encourage and the like. So I think that's a reasonable way to go. The traditional use of green markings on the road network, thinking about cyclist safety, was at the conflict point of bike and car. And it was trying to alert a vehicle that, hey, a cyclist could be coming at this point. So they're more alert to look around for cyclists. But it's starting to be used more and more as a bit of a guiding tool as well as that conflict point. Yeah, so a few people on the same point there. Okay, dooring. Dooring's that term that is used for the opening of that door in front of the cyclist, as many of you have either experienced or certainly know about. And we see some pretty bad injuries in striking the door. Most of the fatalities that have occurred around Australia associated with dooring crashes have been actually a secondary impact. So the rider has hit the door or clipped the door and fallen into the traffic lane that they're riding next to, and then being struck by a vehicle or run over by a vehicle. So that's where we've seen some pretty severe end ones. And it becomes a challenging thing for us to try to address. And then when we think as auditors what we can do, it continues to be challenging. It gets super challenging on your roads like Sydney Road here because this lane is a clear way. So during part of the day, that is a travel lane here. So doing a whole lot of marking in this area sort of becomes the middle of the lane during parts of the day. So these ones, there's a lot of looking at, complete transformation of the cross section of these sorts of roads, which is really where you have to go if you want to alleviate this. If you have permanent parking like this, you certainly can mark things a bit more, which is good. This is not without danger in these locations, though, and this is the site of a fatality and a dooring incident with a young cyclist struck by a truck, the door opening and struck through. So when you do have those permanent parking facilities, that's where we have the ability to push the parking out, and you can then run cyclists curbside. And this is a much safer arrangement. It's not without its own risks, but in terms of dooring and interaction with higher speed through traffic, it's a really good facility. We'd call it a Copenhagen type lane, and you can see there well, let me just run through some of the things if you're doing an audit on these sorts of facilities that you might be looking at. So we think about dooring, and have we got enough space here that doors won't still open into the lane from the passenger side? You're thinking about trip hazards for pedestrians crossing. Is it all clear? Thinking about how vehicles are going to offload prams and the big pallets of drinks and things if they're using this as a drop-off point, and is that interaction going to have safety implications? Then the big one, though, is associated with vehicles turning in. So a vehicle turning in here and a cyclist coming up here. So sight lines blocked by the parked vehicles and the like is something to be aware of. You can see the traditional use of green paint there to try to highlight that to the driver. And yeah, so we want to think about those sight lines. Vehicles coming out is a more annoying one where they block the cycle lane. Not as much of a safety issue as such, but certainly a more of an annoyance. One little trick that I like to do and suggest in audits, and have had some of the designers in my crew put into some of their designs, is to get that area there and texturize it heavily, like do bluestones or do some raised treatments, because that vehicle turning in, if you can slow them at that point, it's a really nice one, gives more time for the cyclist to see what's going on, for the driver to see, and it's just a nice point to slow the vehicle down. Yeah, Marissa, I better check in. There's a good bit of interaction, bit of conversation going on behind the scenes. It looks like some people are answering other people's questions. That's good.
Yes, definitely. As Sid mentioned, I thought safety buffers were mandatory, but Chris has mentioned that these photos are in Melbourne and there might be different rules elsewhere.
Yeah. Yes. There's generic principles here. There's little nuances in each jurisdiction.
Yeah, of course. Referring to slide 28, just a couple slides ago, Joshua said that surely a pedestrian or cyclist overhead bridge would be a good option. Yeah.
So I think that was the dual lane roundabout one, and absolutely agree. Very expensive. This all starts at your strategic planning level, and often as auditors, we're stuck down at the point where they're not going to build a pedestrian or a cyclist's grade separation, and we want to really do the best we can with what they're going to do at that time. But fundamentally, I agree with you.
Joshua's just mentioned, and interesting to note, with bicycle lanes on the far left-hand side of the road, cyclists still tend towards cycling on road to avoid debris.
Yeah. So again, you get this. You can get good facility that not all of your cyclists will use it. It's something to continue to think about.
Yeah. And just one question from earlier: should road rage not be considered as part of driver behaviour?
Yeah, that's why I sort of mentioned it was quite the topic of debate amongst our audit team as to whether this should be included or not. And I sort of said that, well, intentional acts that cause harm aren't really a sort of road safety issue. We don't want them, and we should be, thinking about our infrastructure if it's going to exacerbate that. But couldn't draw that direct line to sort of a traditional road safety issue. So wasn't thinking about it. You'd certainly note it if your infrastructure is particularly going to cause these challenges, but we're more focused on those unintentional mistakes or drivers who are out there maybe intentionally going a bit faster and doing other things, and if there's things that we can do to reduce that risk. But it's a blurry line.
Sid's just asked, how wide are these lanes? Can road sweepers get in them?
So there's different good guidance out there now available. Australia's starting to produce some guidance. I point to that Melbourne design guidance, and I think Queensland's got a good document on it as well. And I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what these ones are. Yes, so sometimes the sweeper sweepers can get in there. You make them too wide, cars can get in there too, and they park in there. And so you've got to have a think about what you do to prevent that from the entry point as well. Just another one on, where do you draw the line on road safety audits versus, road rage? Well, like things like personal safety are another interesting one. So like a pedestrian underpass, for example, as a road safety auditor of pedestrian underpass, are you going to be mentioning all of those personal safety things like lighting and distance between exit points here, so people don't feel trapped, or it's not an area that, again, it's not the prime focus of a road safety audit. Our road safety audit is thinking about crashes with cars and pedestrians and cyclists versus pedestrians and these sort of things. So there might be overlap, but it's not our particular role to be delving into that. You may mention a few things just as notes, but yeah, it's an interesting one.
No other questions for now, Ken?
All right, well, let me go through a little bit more and then we'll take a short break, cover motorcyclists, and then we've got to give everybody their big assignment to do, which is exciting.
We do.
Okay, so when shared paths or cycleways cross roads and you want to provide priority to the cyclists and pedestrians, in a lot of jurisdictions, we have to opt with a setup like this. It's actually, the sign is just changed to that now. So the way I want you to think about this is think about it as an intersection between two roads, and the cycle path road has priority. So you sign it accordingly. It's got a giveaway sign. And then you think about it sort of in that perspective of ensuring that vehicles can see the intersection, they can see the hold line, they can have sight distance up and down the road. So you can see one there again, and it's just trying to give that impression. Auditing these, you really do need to try and ensure that, okay, is it going to be obvious to motorists that they have to give way at this location? I think this one's quite obvious, but raising them is certainly a wonderful feature to really enhance that as well, like this one. So that's what a cyclist would be able to see. Another, I think, elegant way to do local area traffic management, and this is an example, a bit of graffiti on the signs, but that's all right, is cyclist bypass lanes. So when we do local area traffic management, or when you're auditing a scheme that has local area traffic management, you'll see that a lot of the local area traffic management devices and features we use, like a one-way slow point or a chicane or even a mini roundabout and the like, they squeeze cyclists in with cars. But there's often the opportunity to create this bypass lane where this sort of one-way slow point, which is, intentionally only fits one car through. So cars coming from each direction, they sort of slow down. They got to work out who's going to go first. And yeah, it's a pretty good feature. Works really well. You would sort of intentionally not telling them who to go first. And the cyclists get to continue on through and not be squeezed through that. So the shared path audit guidelines, I think, are pretty good. They talk about lots of different things that we should be considering, common safety considerations if you're doing a shared path or a cycleway audit. So path widths, obstacles, hazards, the horizontal and vertical alignment of it, how steep is it, how windy is it, surface conditions, path intersections. So lots of good stuff there. There I am about to go out there with a colleague around the Bendigo network. We usually put a dash cam on the bike, carry some sort of electronic level in order to check how steep some of the downgrades are, something to measure the heights of any going under structures and these sorts of things. And I use a little I use an app called Context Cam, and I'll show you. Yeah, that's sort of the output of a Context Cam photo, because you can write yourself some little notes, tells you where it is, exactly where it is, direction. And it's also, like most photos you take on your phone, geo tagged, so you can get back to the office, upload all your photos, and then just go, and then just on a map, and they just spread out along the entire path network exactly where your issues were, and you can then sort of dive in and write them up in that way. So it's a neat little one, like $10 or something. There's a couple of other options. I think one's called Solo Locate. Yeah, so the one I use is Context Cam, but there's plenty of them out there. Anyway, path-to-path intersections, clear priorities, good sight lines, advanced warning, sign guidance, 90-degree intersections if you can, and trying to manage speed. So they're not bad principles for general intersections as well. But this one here is just a bit confusing on path priority and this new bit. Okay, well, once you've got lots of people on this, are we going to be clear? And if cyclists are coming through at a bit of speed, that might just be a little bit of an issue. And another path priority confusion here with two paths sort of connecting. Certainly, leaving the path, we think about the hazards, similar to the way we would think about hazards in the roadside. Now, paths actually are quite, or riders are quite susceptible to leaving the path due to the fact that some of these shared paths have lots of dogs and kids and all sorts of things going on. So avoiding things is quite commonplace. And so when you have these drop-offs, that's obviously going to be issue. Even smaller drop-offs can be issues. And the Austra's Guide to Road Design Part 6A has some really good information about sort of how we think about distances of hazards and drop-offs and things, even, not on the path, but we're still considering that sort of thing as a hazard, and probably either should be delineated or protected. Shane's made a good point. It looks like it floods. Well, a lot of cycleways are in flood-prone areas, and that's where they've got the land and they've done it there. So a common time you actually a council will engage an audit team to do a shared path audit is after flood events, and they want to see what's happened and if there's anything that should be rectified from a cyclist safety perspective. Yeah, sometimes like you get things in the path like these sort of things, which at night could be issues. And there you go. There's one that's definitely within a flood area and got lots of the debris and silt and stuff there. Last couple of slides on cyclists. Cyclist friendly fences. So this is not cyclist friendly. This will catch handlebars and pedals and snag the bike if they go through that. The common practice on cycling friendly fences is to have a rail at shoulder height for whatever it is, 85th percentile height of cyclists. You can have a secondary rail lower as well, but the idea is, you don't snag, you sort of run along it. The back of W-beam systems. So a lot of designs, when a shared path facility is getting close to a road, we'll put a barrier system between the high-speed vehicles and the path users. Excellent thing to do, protecting that path user. However, the back of the W-beam system can be very sharp and harsh. And if a cyclist was to leave the path for some reason, hit that, they're in a lot of trouble. So we would look at some sort of back-to-back W-beam system, like this one, for example, or there's the newer flexible W-beam products have some really good back-to-back W-beam systems. So just thinking about the back of that rail, there's also other additions councils have used on their plastic products that run along it and the like. And hazards within the path, which are there to stop vehicles entering, just really highlight those and delineate them. At night, this would be a bit of a disaster for a cyclist. I think somebody's maybe tied that bag around the chain there to warn other cyclists or something. But this, I think, is a better setup. If you do have a hazard in the path, we don't want hazards in the path, but sometimes this is a cable stay holding up a power pole. It's not ideal to have it there, but it's been pretty well delineated. It's got flexible bollards, so those are bounce down and up. It's got some line marking on the approach So yeah, that's a good point somebody's made there. So there's a cyclist thing path on there. That's the boulevard down in Richmond, and it gets used heavily as a training cyclist route. And they use the road, and then the commuter cyclists are all on the path and the shared path. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird setup. In the learning management system, we've popped in there some of these thematic road safety audit sheets that we've prepared, because if you asked to do a cycling audit, which is usually on a shared path, but also could be, we've got particular concerns for cyclists. Just how do you sort of think about that a little bit differently to a normal road safety audit? Because the focus really is on that one road user. I would say like a normal road safety audit should consider all road users. I mean, must consider all road users. This one has a bit of a specific focus. So I've put a fact sheet in around that. And I'll have a fact sheet for motorcyclists as well on it. All right, well, let's take our break. I think maybe while we have a short break, we'll pop up a 2-question quiz. It's fairly easy, but take 4 minutes, have a stretch, fill up your coffee, answer the 2 questions, and we'll get back into it. Oh, quiz hasn't quite come up. There it is. All right, see you in 4 minutes. Into it, because we've got a bit of stuff to try to cover there. So let's maybe end that poll now and display the results. Just changing over my slides. So which following is not a common cyclist infrastructure requirement? So cadence is correct, although it is a cycling term to try to trick you. That's how fast you're pedaling, is your cadence. That not a cyclist infrastructure term. Well done. And what is the name for a shared space arrow? It is a sharrow, as most of you got. Confused a few on the sparrow factor. There. All right. We're going to now jump in and talk about another two-wheeled road user. Sorry, I'm just getting rid of there. Okay. Sorry, hopefully that's working now, Marissa.
That's all good, Ken. We can see that.
Yeah, so motorcyclists, so the final road user specific little module we've got, and again, sort of just touching on the surface of what we could get into associated with motorcycle safety infrastructure, but just a few things for you to have in mind when you're auditing and ensure you consider the needs of motorcyclists for safe travel. And again, I'll point you to some technical information and then into the common issues and terminology. So the general sort of research and commentary around motorcycle safety at a high level is somewhere between 20 and 30 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured per kilometre travel than a car. So, I mean, that's a staggering risk profile, and it's for quite a combination of factors, and I don't have an exact breakdown of any of the specific factors and probably don't know them all. But we certainly have that vulnerability to injury. We have the inherent instability in the sense that, balancing on the two wheels. We have the speeds of travel. And like any road user, there can be inappropriate behavior, but we see that across the board. Easily hidden behind other road users and the like. But as has been pointed out there, it is very fun. I am a licensed motorcycle rider. I wouldn't say I'm an active rider. I'm very scared of getting out there, spending my life looking at the crashes and the death and the serious injury. But yes, when you're out there, it is a lot of fun. Now, I mentioned there that there's not great guidance on motorcycle safety infrastructure. There is some guidance. Influence. It's been a collection of stuff done a couple of times, and it's the Making Roads Motorcycle Friendly package. And it's trying to understand what characteristics of the road environment are particularly bad or good for motorcyclists and documenting those. Compared to other road user groups, this is just a drop in the ocean as to what, is out there. So I think we really can continue to enhance that, but you'll find probably one of those for your jurisdiction. If not, there's other jurisdictions available. I'll keep an eye out for sneaky wallies there as well. So here are 5 S's I like to think about for motorcycle safety: sight, surface, signs, strike, and speed. It's just a nice way to think through risk for motorcyclists. What was our formula for risk again? Anybody got that? Go type it into the chat. Likelihood times severity. Well done, Nick. You're on the board. So likelihood times, well, consequence or severity, or probability times severity or consequence. The chance of something bad and then how bad it's going to be. And if we put those into looking at these, the sight, the surface, the signs are all really trying to stop crashes happening in the first place. The strike is what we talk about. What is happening in that crash event, what's being hit, how fast is it all happening. And the speed, the speed influences both the chance of a crash and the severity outcome of that crash, the consequence. So let me just touch on each of these very briefly. Sight. Okay. A rider is a smaller object out there. That's very obvious, but even small cars we see as riders being smaller than that, but using the travel lanes of the vehicle. So we find these challenging situations with sightlines being blocked by objects we don't consider sightline impediments in a traditional sense, and also the dynamic visual obstruction. So vehicles blocking sightline of riders from other vehicles. Just to sort of demonstrate smaller things that are blocking sightlines, just wanted that little sign sort of blocking quite a bit of a rider, just to show that, sightline things like different poles, signal controller boxes, small shrubs can be sightline impediments too. Also, I talked about dynamic visual obstruction. Riders sort of, you see them hidden behind other vehicles. That dynamic visual obstruction stuff plays out mostly as auditors when we're thinking about, different intersection designs, new intersection, turn movements, and you've got to think about it during times of a bit of congestion and how, what are the vehicles blocking sight lines. Sight is also important about riders being able to see what's coming up and adjust their speed and lines appropriately. So the use of really appropriate warning signs and guiding signs help riders to make those informed decisions. Now, I'll give out a prize if anybody can tell me the technical term for a curve like this that tightens up. Curve tightens. I think I've got it as a curve tighten sign. Let me know. I'll give Zishan one for broken back. It's not the technical term for it, but it is used in that. Mikkel is correct with compound, and Matt was just after that. Just in after that. So we've got spiral and we've got hairpin in there as well, devil's tail, all different terms that are used, but that one's technically a compound curve. And it's got 2 radiuses. A spiral would continue to tighten up. This is more a two radius curve, and a hairpin is a single radius, very tight curve. So you got that radius and then that radius. Now, spirals, and compound curves are especially bad for motorcyclists. The reason for that is that the rider sort of approaches a curve and they can see a consistent curve radius, which then they set themselves in terms of a speed and a line on. And then they get into it, and then it suddenly tightens up on them. A spiral, like a continually tightening radius curve, riders will have more of a perception that it is tightening. So they are a bit more cautious in how they do it. So these signs were invented to try to warn of this, that the curve's going to tighten, even though it doesn't look like it. Try and add that. We do it. Riders are very aware of signage, probably one of our most aware road users of signage that we place out there. But even, putting a, I don't know, say you wanted to put a 25 kilometer per hour speed advisory on the second part of this, the second radius. If you signed it, back here with a 25 and a normal curve sign, the riders sort of come up and are also influenced by what they can see from the visual clue of that. And they say, no, it's not a 25. And they're into it, and then it tightens up. But the addition of this sort of curve tightens and that specific sign really tell the story quite well. So I recommend those if you're doing those motorcycle touring routes and you notice those compound curves, to be really highlighting those with these sorts of signage to say that they're quite different. Here's one on a popular motorcycle route, which was a 252 radius curve going into a 117 radius curve. And sure enough, there were 4 motorcycle runoff road reported crashes at that location. It's probably got some compounding risk factors there of an unsealed area where gravel wash would be coming out onto the sealed surface. But nonetheless, the compound nature of that's also going to cause some issues. Now, we see these crashes. Is the curve tighten sign in the Australian standard? What a great question. It's certainly in the Victorian sign suite and been used a fair bit there and in New Zealand. But is it in the Australian standard? I do not have the answer to that. I'll have to look it up. Making myself a note. Shall get back to you. The turn sign, sorry, this little diagram, we've got a keep clear. It's a massive keep clear. I don't know why I've used this, but you've got queuing from a set of signals up here and one vehicle turning across and another vehicle coming up. Now, motorcyclists are overrepresented in this crash configuration, and they are, well, you tell me, are they more likely to be vehicle 1 or 2? I mean, they could be either, but they're more likely to be markers on it 2, correct? They are, and that's because they're smaller, they're more hidden. We see the same when you've got a bike lane curbside, as we talked about earlier. Vehicle to vehicle crashes occur in this scenario as well. But yeah, certainly that number 2. So whoever was first on that, I think it was Mark, can have a prize. And when I do the sort of one day Making Roads Motorcycle Friendly course, which a few of you have come to, we talk a bit about this, and there's some options. You can move the hold line back a little bit, open up some sight lines. Well, certainly we could signalize this part of it and connect it to these signals, maybe even with just a drop-off red and an orange signal that's signal linked. We could slow motorcyclists down in this with, raising this portion, close it off if you could. Lots of options to lessen that risk. Actually, there's a picture of that site. You can see the Pajero, the white Pajero turning in would have sightlines completely blocked by that truck. So they're just making a guess that they can go at that point in time. And there you go, motorcyclists hidden behind the tree there. Okay, surface. So motorcyclists take corners and curves on a lean, and center of gravity is sort of pushed out, and the surface becomes a highly important feature for containing, for them being able to stay upright. And we really want to think about that on the approach to curves, through curves, or wherever the riders are potentially taking emergency evasive action, or more likely to. So intersections being a good example of that. So nice, consistent, good skid resistant surfaces are what we want, but we don't want these sort of things like depressions in the road, because they can sort of bounce a rider, and that will alter the lane positioning. And we've seen some fatalities across Australia associated with depressions in the road and bouncing riders into opposing lanes. So we want to think about that. And then there's the general, things like this, which look pretty obvious, but if a rider was traveling behind a vehicle, it's not going to be a good outcome. Well, I don't think this one's going to be a good outcome for anybody. Just lots of things. Well, if we talk about work sites, thinking about the gravel and the mud and things that are washed out there can be an issue for cyclists and motorcyclists, and especially often in urban areas as well. We think about scooters and the like. And if we can possibly do full width patching, that's a good thing, just so the join of the patch to the rest of the road is not right a line. Now, there's cost implications to that and the like, so think about that carefully. But if we do have a surface deficiency on a curve, we really want to warn of it. I mean, this one's out there up in the Yarra Ranges, and if a rider's coming around there, they're locked into their line. They're locked into really where they're going. As they approach this, there's no option to go inside that. Physics doesn't really allow that outside of it, or pull the bike upright, which then the nature of that will be to go to the other side of the road. So really pre-warning of it, obviously trying to rectify it, but pre-warning of it is important. And then steel plates, obviously very slippery when they get a bit moisture on them. Positioning or trying not to have them is good, but using the skid resistant surfacing and highlighting them if we absolutely must have them. Again, you sort of think, wouldn't they see something that big? You've got to think of those scenarios. Maybe it's at night, maybe they're traveling behind another vehicle, and it surprises the rider. So there's one with a skid resistant surfacing and highlighted yellow. The bolt's coming up a little bit on the one. When you're looking at design stage audits, you can often see where services are going to be in different areas, and services in like circulating carriageway of roundabouts is something we would like to avoid if possible. And certainly motorcyclists are one of the road users that aren't going to fare well from that, just because it's an area where they're looking around. They're probably or potentially making emergency braking maneuvers and the like. They're on a bit of a lean, so some compounding potential issues there. Lots of ways to improve surface, including skid resistance improvements, which can be quite beneficial for riders. There's some water blasting going on, but there's high skid resistance surfacing available if you have particular areas of interest. So there's an intersection that was treated with high skid resistance on the approach to the intersection, where the braking may happen through the intersection, where those turning maneuvers or avoiding maneuvers would be happening. But as this is, expensive stuff, it wasn't, continued on further out this way, because that's where the riders sort of through the higher risk spot and at an upright and just less likely to need that really high skid resistance surface. I'll come back to barrier systems. I mean, this is talking about trying to seal up to the edge of, up to a barrier if possible. But let's talk about curbing. So a barrier curb, so this sort of curb here is, is going to destabilize a rider. We need to use that sometimes for different reasons. But if you are able to make the curbing more mountable, it's going to be more friendly for a rider. But certainly any of these sort of curb facilities, you try to ensure we are highlighting those. So making sure everybody can see them at least. Now, here's an example of one which I think is actually quite well highlighted. It's a very small lip, but it's here to show you just the small surface change that can destabilize a rider. If I can play it. No, it's not going to play. Sorry. We'll keep going. I'll try and get that working another time. Line marking. Yeah, so line marking, large swathes of line marking, thermoplastic line marking can be very slippery. So we don't want to see big swathes of line marking out there where riders could be braking or leaning. And one that particularly will come up if you do a lot of road safety audits is the people wanting to paint a big stop sign or a big give way sign at an intersection, usually where they've got an overshoot problem. So they're trying to highlight to drivers that this is a point you're going to have to stop or give way. And but it's also there where they want to paint it is right where a rider might be needing to hard brake because they've also been a little bit confused by that. So we're putting a potential skid resistance issue right at a critical point for a rider. And it's come up quite a few times I've seen in my career. So we just want to minimize. I mean, we need to line mark the roads, but we just want to think about where and how much of it we're doing. Signs. So there are motorcycle specific warning signs. I mentioned earlier, motorcyclists quite attuned to signage. So we have the benefit of being able to warn, inform and guide if we can through signage and get some pretty good effects out of that. If we want to say to a motorcyclist, hey, here's one that's particularly bad for you, motorcycle rider, you can use this sort of warning sign, usually with a supplementary plate to specify exactly what it is. Usually used in the time between being able to sort of rectify the actual issue itself, like a rough surface or loose stones. You'd think, well, why put up a sign? Why not just sweep the stones? But it's probably got a side road, which is sweep, cars are pulling gravel onto the road, or it's a quarry up there or something like that. But just our normal warning signs, informing signs, guidance signs are really beneficial for riders. A couple more things. So strike, riders leave the road to the outside of curves. That's fairly obvious. So we want to think about the outside of curve and not having hazards if we don't need them there. This one's in New Zealand, actually, in the Coromandel Loop, very popular motorcycle area. So, surface deficiency you can see there, and then so surface deficiency doesn't look too bad, but and we've got the concrete blocks here, which is not going to be a good outcome for any road user really, but motorcyclists won't fare well there. And of course, galvanized steel posts, where we see lots and lots of galvanized steel posts out there. And they're deemed frangible, according to ASVAP, the Australian Safety Barrier Assessment Panel. Is deemed frangible means it will break away on impact, but that's for cars. Easily strong enough to kill a rider. A galvanized steel pole, hit it in a car, it'll just fold on itself like a matchstick. But if a rider hits it, it will bend, but the forces associated with that are strong enough to kill a rider. So some different options for low-mounted signs, bounce back, so compressed rubber ones. Low mounted seems to be all right. Anything a little bit higher is very problematic. We're doing some work with Swinburne Materials Testing Lab and the Victorian government trying to do some engineering design on something that could withstand the wind forces at some higher heights. It's a huge torque load that you're trying to deal with, but be frangible enough at the base to not kill or seriously injure motorcyclists. A fun engineering challenge. Riders lean when they go around curves, so we think about that. There's a staged photo of a rider sort of leaning to show sort of entering into roadside, so a bit of clearance is important. And into barriers. So the research around motorcyclists and barrier systems has shown that about half the riders are off the bike and they slide and they hit the base of the barrier system. The other half are on the bike trying to gain control and they hit the barrier system and they go over the top of it very quickly. The rider and bike together aren't running along the barrier system like we would want, like a car would. Yeah, so for those sliding, we think about underrun protection. So that could be rub rail, it could be some of the proprietary products available. And that's hitting those abrupt stops with posts and running along that system. So you can imagine sliding along at 60 kilometers an hour on your back and hitting one of those posts. Well, that's going to result in death. Hitting that and sliding along it is going to be less severe. And the testing has shown that that is, survivable at certain speeds around that 60 kilometers an hour. And that can be retrofitted. So you may be suggesting this on popular motorcycle routes or where you've got concerns for that they retrofit their barrier systems with underrun protection. And here we see, okay, this one may not play. I think all my videos have decided to, cannot play media. All right. I'll make sure we put those into the learning management system. That's just a motorcycle dummy crash testing with barrier systems, just to show some of the forces involved. Now, why has our motorcycle underarm protection stopped at this point? Anybody got any thoughts on that? Why we stopped there? Oh, yeah. So again, Nick first in there with the terminal needs space to work, and David's nicely clarified it with sort of the crumple zone area of the barrier system. Yeah. So this is its own product. It's an end terminal, and it's sort of specifically designed, but it's never been tested with the additional rub rail. So we would just be concerned that adding that underrun protection would compromise the way this functions. And that if a vehicle is to hit this, that it may not function the way it should. So yeah, watch out those kind of things in post-opening audits. Occasionally we do see a contractor connect it all the way up, just make it work. That's going to present dangers to other road users as well. Now, like wire rope safety barriers and motorcyclists is a bit of a meaty storm in a teacup, if you want to call it that. But none of the research and evidence shows that wire rope systems are presenting a lot of death and serious injury for motorcyclists. They seem to, any crashes, which are very, very few, have involved riders sliding and hitting the posts. The wires aren't interacting. If a rider hits it upright, they go over the top. And yeah, but the one thing I suppose the riding community that don't like these, and then, that's only a small portion of the riding community, is that there isn't a great retrofit device to lessen the severity of them. We tried stack cushions for a while, which are post protectors, but you're really dealing with, I suppose, trying to absorb energy in a small point, like a football goalpost padding. What we really want to do is run energy along a system, dissipate energy over big distances, and that's where you get your benefit. So I've used these in the past. I would, if I ever found myself designing or developing up a job and I'd selected wire rope safety barrier systems with these devices, I would simply just go to a flexible W-beam system with underarm protection. It's a better outcome all around. It's going to be very good for all road users and far, far better for motorcyclists. So this is a legacy of the time where we didn't have anything else to work with. It was wire rope systems or the old W-beam systems, which weren't very good at all. But we've got all these wonderful new products these days. Okay, I think that's probably about where I want to get to. A couple of little installation issues. You might see in a post-opening audit of a motorcycle touring route or something, connecting the rub rail directly to the post is not ideal. This is where arms and legs can get in these gaps, and we don't want that. Trying to, fill in the gaps underneath and not direct riders into solid objects if they're sliding along. A bit of thinking around that is good. And of course, we can influence speed with different delineation, speed limits, advisory speeds. So you can see the addition of chevron alignment markers, which will help in terms of rider crashes. The challenge with that is under our traditional scheme, they're installed with galvanized steel posts. So we're kind of putting additional hazards in the roadside right at the point where we think riders are more likely to be leaving the road. So yeah, hence us trying to engineer a bit of something that would work there. Again, it's very hard to make that soft enough that a rider can break it away, not being killed or seriously injured, but strong enough to hold up to really significant winds, which is what you have to do under the Australian standard for wind loads. And of course, advisory speeds can be good as long as we're consistent, and no surprises along these motorcycle touring routes is key. No surprises in terms of, it's labeled 35, but it's actually should have been at 15 because it's fast. I think that's probably all I needed to get to. Motorcycle audits are where a rider will be involved in the audit team, and they will ride and talk to the audit team and explain what they're seeing and feeling, and you just sort of get that collaborative approach to it, which is useful. And we've got a little fact sheet in the learning management system on how to think about doing motorcycle audits as well. Okay, it's about the time that I answer any final questions, but we need enough time to give you a comprehensive little briefing on your audit that you're going to be doing.
Yes, we do. I'll share my screen. Did you want to answer questions first, or actually we'll run through the LMS first, and then we'll see how much time we've got at the end. I'll share my screen.
I'll read the questions while you're getting
okay.
into that and showing people, and then I'll answer any that.
No, all right. So into the LMS, everyone. Down into module 4, you'll find a bunch of resources that Ken has mentioned already in the session today. So we've got some module 4 videos that didn't work for Ken, so you can jump in and have a look. In here, we've got quite a few of them popped in here for you to have to watch over. So you could have a look at those. As Ken has mentioned, we've got some motorcycle case study videos. We've got the thematic audit resources here, and another resource on wire rope barriers. So feel free to jump in and browse through those resources. We also have a module 4 quiz for you today. So please pop in and have a go at that one. The other thing is the assignment. The assignment for module 4, if we go into complete your road safety audit site visit. So we want you to go out and visit a site that we've allocated you and do a bit of a road safety audit, which Ken will talk through the particulars of in just a moment. But we have allocated you all a site. So if you just have a browse down this list after this session, you'll be able to find your name here somewhere, and that's the site that we've allocated you. If you do know the other people that are allocated in your site, some of the sites we've got a couple of people, if they happen to be any of your colleagues, you are most welcome to conduct the inspection with them and do that together. However, we do require you to submit your own report. So no group reports, please complete your own report. And if any of the sites that are listed here, the one that you're allocated to is not convenient for you, if it's too far, or if you prefer a site closer to your home or to your office, please just shoot us an email, let us know. We're happy to accommodate your preference there. So that's no wish at all. Just let us know what you prefer there. The due date, we will run through that perhaps after Ken has talked you through the assignment, but we have an RSA template here. We've got a Word document, which I will open up right now. And Ken, would you like to take them through this document and what they're required to do there?
Yes. Okay. So anything that is highlighted in yellow, you have to action. Okay. So you insert the road name or something like that. I mean, most of these, you're not going to have a distinct project name. Just put some name there. Continue going down. And this is a bit of a template we're using, which conforms with the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6, which you're welcome to reuse this template, rebrand it your own. And we've tried to keep it simple so you can just rebrand it. Use these sort of section headings, and it's good. So you see there, you're putting in your name and the location, a little snip of a map of where you're at. And then you're putting in there, just little bits of information about that. Some existing words are in there. They're sort of standard words that are put in most road safety audits, just explaining the audit process and those sorts of things. So feel free to use those in your own road safety audits again, and these diagrams. But then you get into putting in there in table 1, drawing numbers and the like. Now, for this training exercise, you may not be given drawing numbers, but it's important in real audits to do that in order to ensure that everybody's clear on what version of the design was audited. Then you put the audit team, you put your name and any others that were there. And we've got, road safety auditor in training for this one, but you put auditor when you're up and running. Short description of the existing conditions, but we don't want a lot of detail in this. And then the time you went out to the site in the table. Now you'll see there, nighttime inspection, we've said when we've decided we don't want you to go out at night, just trying to ensure occupational health and safety requirements are all met. All the sites that we've allocated out, we've done a desktop risk assessment on. They can be done safely, but you're going to have to sort of park safely, and I'll talk you through that a little bit at the end. So then you go further down. That's all sort of standard text, which you'll see in most road safety audit templates. You can make some overarching comments, which you do probably at the end after you've found some things, but you might like to summarize what you thought the big issues were and what good aspects there were. And in an audit report, you would you sign it. So we're going to ask you to sign it. It's a formal document. I mean, this one's a training exercise, but in terms of proper practice of auditing, we'll get you to sign that and put your name in there. Then so that's sort of the documentation behind the actual findings of the audit. So you see here that we've got site photos. Now, you would, in a real audit, put quite a few site photos in there to show different aspects. But for this one, we just want you to put one site photo. There you go. I've got me out there at a site, and we want you to sort of replicate that with you. Prove to us that you went to the site, you had a look at it. There is a lot of advantage to going to a site in terms of gathering the wider context of how the site works and behaviors out there, and thinking about the design and how it's going to interact with the existing road network and the like. And it's part of the requirement of these courses that you go out there. So take a selfie if you're out on site, wearing your high-vis vest. As you can see, I've got mine on there. You will be wearing a high-vis vest just to, now you will be able to be on the footpath. We don't want you out there measuring lane widths or anything like that. You're standing back and just generally observing. But then here's the sort of the meat of what you'll be doing for this assignment, which is to write up 3 road safety audit findings. We only want 3. You want to do 25? Well, the markers are only going to read the first 3. So you're wasting your time there. So we've given one example there just to see what we're kind of expecting. So you can see then 3 rows have been highlighted. You're going to find issues, you're going to write them up, risk rate them, provide recommendations, put snips of the design or whatever you think is needed. And that's it. That's all we're going to ask you to do. So then you'll finish all that and PDF it and upload it. Now, click on any of the designs there, Marissa, before we show you how to do it, just random design. Okay, so here's an example. This intersection currently does not have traffic signals, right? But there's a design there to signalize this intersection. Your job as a road safety auditor isn't to look for all the issues that exist now out there, because you're going to go out there and there's not going to be any signals, but you have to imagine it's built and imagine in the future, what are the crashes that could happen at this signalized intersection? So why are you out there? Why are you out there? Well, like, why do you go to the site then? Because this is not there at the site. Well, you're going there to look at how that ties in with the existing, how people are using this area currently, where their crossing desire lines are, whether vehicles are, coming in and out of different points. You look at the design, you imagine it built, and then you're predicting what could go wrong in the future. So it's not an existing conditions audit, it's a design audit. Everybody is auditing the design. If there are things that exist out there now that are a danger that don't appear to be being rectified with these changes, then you might report that as well. But remember, it's a road safety audit of a design. I hope that's clear. We just often get some people who do a road safety audit of the existing conditions and completely ignore the design. Like, the whole point of the design is that's what you are actually assessing. Okay, thank you. So jump back to the learning management system and down to how do you submit this?
Yes. So once you have finished your assignment, you're ready to submit it. There is, so just obviously back into the module 4, complete your road safety audit section. Just scroll down, you've got add submission. Now, just to note, the due date for this assignment is Thursday, the 24th of August. So we do give you a couple of weeks. Is it a couple of weeks? Yes, I've lost track of time, what the date is today. But once you're ready to submit that, just down add submission, and you can just scroll back down. You can just insert your file here, just drag and drop that in, save changes, and that will upload into our system, and we'll get notification, and then we'll have our markers grading your assignment, and you will receive notification again once the grader has marked your assignment. So that's how we, so just again into RSA August, just down into module 4. and it's here, complete your road safety audit site visit. And just a bit of a tip, anything that has a checkbox here on the side is a task that you have to complete. So we've got all the quizzes up here, and that was your module 1 assignment. So anything with the tick box is a task that you need to complete. And we have the safe work method statement agreement, Ken.
Yeah, so this is all about that cycling safety and the site safety. So we have, as I say, chosen sites that are low risk, but it does require you to just behave appropriately. So we ask that you have a look at the safe work method statement and that you do a 1-question quiz, which says you've read it and you agree that you agree to operate under those. It's pretty logical safety stuff. Like, you're not going to go out there intoxicated. You're going to wear your high-vis vest. You know, if you had to drive 8 hours to get there, you'd take breaks. But if you had to drive 8 hours to get to the site, just tell us.
Probably too far.
We'll give you a site that's near your house. At sites with multiple auditors, does each auditor need to provide 3 unique findings? What was the clarification on that? I think we said yes. Yeah. That's right.
So, yeah, at least in your own words as well. Yeah.
Unique findings. If you struggle to, if you've got a couple of people out there, you struggle to find 6 things, you could get in contact with us. We'd give you a few hints or things to potentially look at. It doesn't have to be 1 primary and 2 supporting treatments. You could just, have supporting treatments only. You could just have 1 primary. You could have 2 primaries. There's no requirements on that, but we do want you to make recommendations. Now, it's just ticked over the hour, so we better let people go. If you do have any follow-up questions, get in contact with the training team and we'll answer those questions. Otherwise, enjoy your audits, but feel free to reach out if you need some assistance.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everyone. See ya.